This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports. The doctors are making their weekly house call, giving you a dose of Yankees baseball on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Start spreading the news.
And here they are now, folks, your host, Dr. Paul Semendinger and Dr. E.J. Fagan. Fagan, sir.
New York, New York, these vagabond shoes.
Welcome to the Start Spreading the News YouTube show with me, Paul Semendinger, and my wonderful co-host, the great and the wonderful E.J. Fagan.
How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing great, EJ. Of course, this is a YouTube exclusive video show that's also found on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, and iTunes. All of those are the Northeast Streaming Sports outlets. And we just asked everyone who's watching, if you enjoy the program, to subscribe and like, whether you're doing that with the YouTube program or through iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, or iTunes. Hey, EJ, I have some great news.
What's the great news?
Oh, well, I have this Yankee book coming out. It's called The Least Among Them, and it'll be out in early October. And believe it or not, we are going to be having an exclusive book launch party at the Yogi Berra Museum in Little Ferry, New Jersey. That's going to be on October 10th. And that's going to be from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. There'll be a Meet the Author and I'll speak about the book. And then from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock will be a meet and greet. And people can come to the museum and we can talk Yankees baseball. We can talk about the book, The Least Among Them, the story of the Yankee players whose entire career lasted but one game. And it's getting rave reviews by lots of other authors and baseball people. So I'm all excited about that. I know you're in Chicago and you won't be able to make it, but if you're in the New York area, I hope I see you there, EJ.
Hey, Paul, I won't be able to make it, but congratulations on the book. When you first told me about this book, it's such a creative idea. It's a baseball. Everybody's read a baseball book about the same players, right? And so now we're going to hear some very different stories about Yankee baseball, which I'm just very excited for, and can't wait to get my hands on a copy.
Oh, you'll get your hands on a copy, believe me.
Yeah, sign it for me.
Yeah. Oh, and that autograph, that is worth, well,
almost
$10.
$10.
Worth any more than the published price with the autograph in it, but it's still fun to do, right? All right, EJ, let's start off with the bad news. The Yankees, they did win today, so that's good news. Gary Sanchez had a walk-off single. Yet their record now, 80 wins, 64 losses. They've gone 4-12 out of their last 16. Heading into tonight, they're a half game out of the wild card. If the season ended today, they would not be in the playoffs. They're behind Toronto and Boston. Recently, they lost 2 of 3 to the Angels. They lost 2 of 3 to the Orioles. They were swept by the Toronto Blue Jays, and then they lost 2 of 3 to the lowly New York Mets. Again, they just barely won today. They're on pace for a season with 90 wins. And so I ask you, EJ, are the Yankees in trouble?
Well, thank God for the Minnesota Twins. Yeah, they're in trouble. They're because two things happened. Not only did the Yankees follow up their 13-game winning streak with their worst stretch of the season, just an absolutely horrific stretch. Not only is everything going wrong, right? The Yankee team is not at all pulling out of this dive. I mean, the Yankee hitters are kind of just barely waking up, mostly through the bat of Aaron Judge. And the Yankee bullpen is as bad as it's been all season. The Yankee starting pitching is as bad as it's been all season. So not only is it a complete collapse for the Yankees, but the Blue Jays haven't lost a game during this stretch. The Blue Jays made up a 9-game deficit or something. Just an incredible comeback on their part. And that's combined for the Yankees going from, a fairly comfortable first place in the wild card to threatening the division 2 weeks ago to being completely out of the playoffs right now. If the season ended today, they're not a playoff team. They got a chance to make it up, but if something doesn't change on this team, right? If the hitters don't start hitting, if the bullpen doesn't figure it out, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen, and I think we can reasonably expect starting pitching to improve. If something doesn't get a lot better, this team's not making the playoffs.
Is that then a failure? I know we talked last week about the idea that if the Yankees don't win the World Series, that's a silly, or at least a lot of people perceive that to be a silly mission statement, because how often do you win the World Series? But the Yankees, one of the highest payrolls, they're designed to be very competitive. If they don't even make the playoffs, what do you think? Does that define failure?
Pretty much. I mean, look, if the Blue Jays win every game if the Blue Jays continue on their hot streak for the rest of this month, the Yankees aren't going to make the playoffs unless, the Red Sox or someone really, really collapse. I think the Yankees would have been a success if they had won 95 games, won the wild card, and then lost in the wild card game. I think that would have been a good season. Right now, they're looking like 88, 89 games if they don't figure things out pretty quickly, not make the playoffs, and just not play good baseball down the stretch. They're not getting beat well, if that makes sense. I mean, they're making some bad errors. Gleyber Torres, Gary Sanchez have made some just awful errors. They're getting absolutely nothing out of their bullpen. I mean, I don't know how many members of this bullpen I want to return next season, but it's not that many. And just overall, they've taken really high expectations and just dashed them against the rocks, right? I mean, if happiness is expectations minus reality, and the Yankees are on the real wrong side of that equation right now. So, let me put it this way. I'm going to be the optimist one more time. So the Mets right now are feeling pretty good, right? They just beat the Yankees. They're kind of coming back in their division. The Mets are, I believe, 5 games back of their division right now. The Mets are 72-72. They're a 500 team. They have allowed more runs than they've scored, but they're in a really bad division. And so the Yankees would be in first place in the American League, the National League East right now. They'd be right behind the White Sox for first place, 1 game behind the White Sox in the AL Central. They would be very competitive in the AL West against the Houston Astros. The only divisions that they wouldn't really have a shot at right now are the NL West, which is the best division in baseball this season, and to some degree the NL Central. This has been a tough road, and this is an above average team, and above average team doesn't make the playoffs right now.
Right. And it's often been like that. Red Sox have said that when the Yankees were having their run. They were always the second best team, often the second best team in the league, and they couldn't finish in first place because the Yankees were just that much better. You even go back to like 1954 when the Indians won all those games, and the Yankees, I think, had their most wins in the 50s, and that year, because of the way it was all set up, you either come in first place or in the playoffs, or you don't make the World Series. This is an audible here. We hadn't talked about this beforehand, but does that give us reason to think about maybe a different type of playoff structure, just as a real quick thought, as an aside?
It's a good question. I think more teams should make the playoffs. I'd love to cut the regular season a little bit and expand the playoffs, just because I love playoff baseball. I love a playoffs that requires you to use your full roster, not a playoff where you can just use 3 starting pitchers and 3 relievers and call it a day, which means a longer playoffs. I've mentioned on the show before, I'm a big hockey fan, and the NHL playoffs are amazing, right? 7-game series, 4 7-game series in order to win the Stanley Cup. They last for 2 months, but it's fun. It's intense. It's the thing that creates storylines and rivalries and memories. So I would love to add another round of the playoffs. I'd love to eliminate the playoff, the play-in games, and replace those with kind of a full series. Maybe make them 7-game series even. I'd be fine with that. I think that'd have to cut into September baseball. I think anyone wants even more games. I think that would kill players pretty quickly. But I think I think right now the question is unbalanced schedules and divisions. And there's some trade-offs there. Players would have to travel a lot more and all that. So I think this is about, in terms of divisions and wild cards, this is about as good as you get. And unless you're adding more rounds of the playoffs, you're just going to end up with the situation every once in a while. It's right, weird that Major League Baseball is this unbalanced right now.
Correct. And the part of the thing is you're judged against your competition, right? And if your competition in your division's really great in a specific year or for a period of time, you have to figure out how to get better than that competition, right?
Well, and the AL Central is the AL East is really, really good this year, and it's going to have 2 wildcard teams, right? So there's not, it's not like it's robbing. It's not like a team is sneaking in one of the bad divisions, right? I mean, this is the best division in baseball, and it's going to send 3 teams to the playoffs.
Right. And right. So you say the 3 best teams in the American League East are going to make it. So if the Yankees or the Blue Jays or the Red Sox end up being the 4th best team, well, then you are the 4th best team. And how far deep into a division can you go? Right.
Well, let's also remember, just as recently as last week, when we thought this was pretty much a bulletproof playoff spot, we noted that the Blue Jays just had a killer run differential. They have a run differential that's basically the same as the Rays right now. That meaning that they've scored a lot more runs than they've allowed. The Yankees have scored only a few more runs than they've allowed. They look like a slightly above 500 team in terms of runs scored, runs allowed, whereas the Blue Jays look like an elite team. We saw this coming, right? We saw that the Blue Jays were really good and for whatever reason just didn't win enough games earlier in the season. And it's kind of like everything kind of came back to the Yankees at this point. Though I should note that, the Blue Jays, they could win every game. And we're actually, the Red Sox are the other team the Yankees are still competing against. The Yankees are only half a game behind the Red Sox now. So we could be seeing a Canadian wildcard game. A game in Toronto against, with Garrett Cole against whoever the heck Toronto can throw out there. I kind of like those odds. So the season's not over yet. Let's not be too defeatist about this. But, the Yankees got to figure it out quickly.
Yeah, the Yankees have 18 games, and as you know, we always end the show with you previewing what's coming up. But they have 18 games, basically 9 against mediocre to poor teams and 9 against really good teams, right?
9 against the worst 3 teams in the American League. Yeah, and 3 against the Red Sox, 3 against the Blue Jays. So the Yankees have a chance to do this. We're going to talk about managers. And one of the things I think Aaron Boone said after the second Mets loss was that kind of like we got them right where we want them kind of answer, which was more like, hey, we control our own destiny. If we play well, we can still make the playoffs, and that's just still true.
It is
right. Like the Yankees get to play a bunch of bad teams, and they get to play the teams they're competing against. And that's the rest of the season. So if they can make it through this stretch, get their 2 off days, so they're going to have an off day in the 23rd and an off day in the 27th. I could see this game, this team rejuvenating itself just a little bit. But again, players got to figure themselves out for that to happen.
Correct. And the manager's got to put the right pieces in the right spots. And that's not on our topic today, but that's something that's also worth investigating is this idea of, some of the guys who played during that hot streak, Tyler Wade, Andrew Velasquez, Jonathan Davis, those guys, Rougned Odor, were quickly shown the bench, and then the Yankees didn't continue to play well. But that's a topic for another day. Last week, EJ, you brought up the idea that the Yankees coaches have some culpability in this. And I put up a piece on Start Spreading the News a while ago. I reran it over the weekend where I investigated and I looked at the Yankees coaching staff and the fact that most of these guys have really just only had their experiences with the Yankees and never any other real experience. Of course, Aaron Boone never managed or coached anything until he became the Yankees manager. But then you have Carlos Mendoza. He's been a coach since 2018, but just with the Yankees. Marcus Timms, a coach since 2016, but just with the Yankees. PJ Pelletier, coach since 2018, but just with the Yankees.
Matt was a Yankees farmhand.
Yep. Yankees with Matt Blake since 2020. His first major league coaching position. Reggie Wiltis, coach since 2018. The Yankees were his first coaching position. Phil Nevin had coached for the Giants for 1 season. Mike Harkey had been around a little bit with the Marlins and the Diamondbacks. And then Tanner Swanson was a coach on the Twins for a couple of years, and then he's a Yankees coach. You're not seeing a lot of variety there, and you're not seeing a lot of other teams and a lot of experience. You're not seeing guys who really won anywhere. And so I did an investigation, as you know, and I looked at all the other teams going back to the year 2000. Did anybody else build a coaching staff primarily of guys who don't have any other experience except with one team and who are basically learning on the job? And basically the answer was the Diamondbacks sort of did it in 2001. The Angels sort of did it in 2002. But besides that, no. And what do you think?
Well, I think the fact that there's a lot of fairly new coaches on the staff is a sign that the Yankees are on the cutting edge, and I think we've regarded them for many years as being one of the smartest teams in baseball. So if I look at a team like, for example, the San Francisco Giants, they're having a great year with a not particularly impressive roster, a roster that looks a lot like the Yankees, frankly, in a lot of ways. A lot of kind of aging players who have talent but haven't really hit that position in a long time. And they've got a lot of young, kind of recent coaches, kind of in the similar mold, recent former players. Their pitching coach is Andrew Bailey, who I don't know if this is his first coaching gig, but he was a closer not that long ago. Brian Bannister, similar thing where he's been kind of coaching behind the scenes a little bit. Now he's their director of pitching. You have Gabe Kapler, obviously, who was their manager, it's his second club, but he was fairly quickly fired by the Phillies, and before that, he'd been kind of a behind the scenes guy with the Dodgers, and so on. If you kind of go down their list, there's a lot of recent former players, frankly, and they're doing really well. I think the bigger question is not, have the Yankees decided to do something? They have a very specific set of coaching decisions. You're very right about that, but is it working? And I think it's fairly clear at this point that at least on the pitching side, it's not working. The Yankees pitchers, with a few notable exceptions, have been performing worse than expected. And that's only continued this year. So I was watching Clark Schmidt in his first start against the Mets. And Clark Schmidt has a solid fastball, pretty good control with it, and a real big curveball. And the Yankees had him throwing the curveball too much. He was not able to throw strikes because he was bouncing this curveball all over the place. And the Mets knew it was coming and they were taking it. That has been an adjustment the Yankee pitchers have not made. They continue to throw too many breaking balls, which results in a whole lot of walks, which is why every time a Yankee pitcher comes out of the bullpen, they're either walking a ton of batters or allowing a home run on a hung ball. And I think that's a mistake you make when you have a position and you believe in it. And I think the Yankees have an organizational philosophy, which is throw a ton of big breaking balls when you have it and throw fewer fastballs than anybody else. And because they have that philosophy, they have been unable to adjust to other teams adjusting to them. And I think if you had a different set of coaches, you probably have a different pitching strategy. There also is probably a spider tack angle to that, which is a separate conversation. I think during this offseason, the Yankees are certainly going to be thinking about overhauling their coaching staff. I don't think that means necessarily bringing in, Tommy Lasorda, or not Tommy Lasorda, unfortunately. Not bringing in a Lou Piniella or someone like that, like a longtime veteran coach. To come in and kind of like right the ship. Like, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I think we might be talking about bringing in people who maybe have some experience in some other organizations. I think you're underselling some of the experience in some of these teams. Like, for example, Matt Blake was with the Indians for 5 years as kind of like a roving pitching coordinator. And that was a very successful 5 years for pitching. But I suspect, at least on the pitching side, they're going to overhaul things. On the hitting side, I'm still not clear if it's a problem. The Yankees hitters are just not performing, right? Like, I don't think this is a coaching problem with Clint Frazier or Gleyber Torres. I mean, I think it's a Gleyber Torres and Clint Frazier problem. And I don't think it's, I don't think we should be blaming some of the players who are out there who just aren't that good of a hitter anymore. I think the problem is the Yankee hitters just all kind of got old at the same time, other than Aaron Judge. And that's not good. That's on the Steinbrenners and Cashman for personnel decisions more than coaching. It will be an interesting offseason. I'm with you. I think Aaron Boone's job is on the line. If he has a good last couple of weeks and kind of the internal stuff, the stuff that happens behind the scenes that we don't really have access to, if that is going well, maybe he keeps a job. But I think at some point, even if you might not believe Aaron Boone is a bad manager, I'm not sure at this point we can say he's a good manager. And at that point, you don't lose a lot by firing him and finding somebody else. The Yankees will be able to hire anyone they want to manage the New York Yankees, right? That is not a hard thing for the Yankees to do. And so I think they will, is my guess at this point. That doesn't mean, again, Aaron Boone could have a really good last couple of weeks. They could make it to the second round of the playoffs or something. But I'm still I'm at the point where I just don't understand what they're losing by getting rid of him.
Well, and the Yankees have fired managers who've gotten that far in the past. That wouldn't be the first time that's ever happened. Let me go back to the coaches before we get to Boone real fast. You noted that a lot of the guys on the Giants have been players. So most of the Yankees coaches haven't. And Matt Blake did have that experience in Cleveland, but he didn't have that experience at the major league level. And to me, it seems like the Yankees brought in a lot of guys who each individually with, great credentials, who people think are real. A lot of people are very high on them. They have nice reputations, but maybe they brought in too many of the same kind of guy, right? Like the wonder kid or whatever, the smartest kid in the room, the pitching guru and the hitting guru. And they didn't maybe take enough time to round out a coaching staff. And, sometimes it's good to have alternative voices in the room. And I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago. When Joe Torre became the manager, he had Don Zimmer sitting next to him. And Don Zimmer, a longtime baseball mind, Joe Torre, a longtime baseball mind. And Joe Torre used to admit and say stuff in the beginning, like when we were great in '96, a lot of that was Don Zimmer, who was just challenging my thinking and telling me things and making me consider the squeeze bunt or a steal or a double switch or a whatever in a crazy situation. And it was that kind of thinking that kept me on my toes. And, we don't have access, as you said, to the behind the scenes stuff, but I don't get the sense, because you never really seem to hear it or see it anywhere, that anybody in the Yankees seems to have a contrary point of view. They all seem to drink from the same glass. They all seem to have the same philosophy. And maybe that's something that's just hurting them, that like sometimes you need somebody to challenge you. I'm a principal. Sometimes I have teachers come into my office and say, you're doing the wrong thing.
So
Like,
I'll throw a question back at you. What do you think is wrong with the Yankees right now?
Oh,
but from a coaching perspective, like what solution do we have to fix here?
I think you need guys who, and again, the other piece we have is none of these guys have been winners. And I think it takes a certain brand of coach. I think it takes a certain brand of player to understand what it takes to take your talent and also learn how to harness that talent to get to the apex, to become a winner. So,
I'm more kind of like on the technical side of this. That like I think right now, Giancarlo Stanton's hitting too many ground balls. And that's the problem with Giancarlo Stanton this season. I think, as I mentioned, there's a lot of pitchers throwing too many breaking balls. I think a bunch of players are having trouble staying healthy. I think Gary Sanchez is striking out too much, right? Like I think there's lots of very specific things wrong with these players. And to some degree, that's on the coaches, right? And when a lot of players are failing at the same time, specifically a lot of players are getting injured 3 seasons in a row now, then at that point you kind of go, okay, is there something wrong with the coaching staff that's there? And I think some of that blame has to go on them, but a lot of it has to go on the players, right? Like, I'm sorry, like Giancarlo Stanton doesn't need a better hitting coach, right? Giancarlo Stanton's Giancarlo Stanton. He's getting paid the big money. It's his job to hit. And I'm not entirely sure that, it will really matter if you replace Marcus Thames with, an older school hitting coach, or like, you can bring back like a Kevin Long type or someone like that, someone who's been a major league hitting coach for a very long time. I think the one issue here is that the manager is supposed to be that guy kind of managing the coaching staff, not just managing the game. And managing the coaching staff, I think, you can lay some blame at the feet of Aaron Boone. I don't know if Aaron Boone's been identifying problems to them and saying, hey, Marcus Thames, you need to go help Giancarlo Stanton fix himself. Or, hey, Eric Kressley, director of training, we need to figure out why everybody's getting hurt all the time. But at the same time, if you look at the personnel on the roster, specifically the players that are losing us games right now, they're just bad players, right? Andrew Heaney is a bad player, and he's lost the Yankees a bunch of games. The Yankee bullpen right now is bad. They're throwing out junk relievers in key higher leverage innings. Sal Romano pitched an inning, an inning in a tie game last week. Chad Green is being thrown out there and giving up a home run every single time. The players at some point, it's on them as well. And so, again, when you don't seem to be having lots of coaching successes, the cost of firing them goes down. But I mean, if I'm Brian Cashman, I have one choice of what to focus on next offseason. It's cleaning house of all the trash players on this team, right? Like let's get rid of all the below replacement level guys, and let's at least have an above average bullpen, right? Like that would be good right now. I would love a guy with a 3.2 ERA out of the bullpen right now, but they have 0 players that good. And I don't know what kind of coach is going to turn Albert Abreu into a great player. He's had a lot of coaches in the minors. He's just doesn't throw strikes. The other thing I have to say is a lot of these decisions these days are made at the front office level, not just in the Yankee clubhouse, but not just the Yankee organization, but most organizations in baseball. Like the Los Angeles Dodgers, they make their strategic decisions before the game happens in the front office, and it works for them. The Yankees, every indication is they're good at this too. They're smart. They have lots of smart people. They have lots of people with different levels of experience, and they're just not like the players. Just at the end of the day, aren't performing. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you.
Or so one thing that if you want to look at the hitting, the Yankees seem to subscribe very heavily to this 3 true outcome approach, which to me, you want to have a couple guys, Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, maybe now Joey Gallo, and that's fine. But like Gleyber Torres wasn't necessarily, he didn't come up as a 3 true outcome type of hitter. And somehow he became more of that since he got to the Yankees and and each successive season, he seems to be swinging more and more from his heels. So something like that is, to me, seems to be a coaching thing. But again, in the end, you can't fire the entire roster, and you have to look at the coaches, and then you also have to look at the manager. And the other article we were going to talk about today was this point that the Yankees have a reputation of, during the Steinbrenner years, the mid-Steinbrenner years of really throughout the 80s, late 70s and into the 90s, of always firing their managers. But I did a little research, and I realized that the Yankees have really never tolerated having a manager around that didn't win almost immediately, going all the way back to Bob Shalke, who became the Yankee manager in 1930. He managed for one season. The Yankees didn't make the playoffs. He was gone. Yogi Berra managed the Yankees for 164 games. They made the World Series, but he was gone. Johnny Keane got 182 games before he was gone. Bill Verdon got 266 games before he was gone. All these guys never made the World Series. I mean, Verdon was the first one of that group that's in the Steinbrenner era, but then there's others. Even Yogi Berra, the second time around, Lou Piniella, who became a very good manager, had 324 games. And then there's Aaron Boone, who really, along with Buck Showalter, has managed the most games without ever reaching the World Series. And, you look at Showalter, he had bad teams and he made them good. Boone was given a team on the precipice and he was never able to get them to that point. So has the leash run out on Aaron Boone? Have the Yankees given him a long enough chance to prove that he's a good manager?
Yeah, so I don't really care how many World Series he's won. Since Aaron Boone has been a Major League manager, the Yankees have the third best record in baseball. Only the Dodgers and the Houston Astros have a better record than them. Tampa is tied with them at the moment. So I don't think I still think that's a good barometer to judge people by. Baseball is a competitive sport. It's not 1998 anymore. The Yankees can't assemble a super team. No team can assemble a super team without spending what the Dodgers spend. If the Yankees had traded for Max Scherzer, I think they're in first place right now. Or if they had traded for pick your name that got traded at the trade deadline, they didn't.
Yeah, Verlander a number of years ago, right?
So if they trade for Verlander, I think the Yankees have won the World Series instead of the Houston Astros. If they had signed Liam Hendricks this offseason, maybe they're doing better than the White Sox. Ultimately the Yankees just have a bad roster. I'm sorry. The Yankees right now, they have a couple of really good players and a whole lot of dead weight. In hindsight, the Giancarlo Stanton trade was a bad trade and it's hurting the Yankees right now. The Aaron Hicks signing was a bad signing. It's hurting the Yankees right now. Some other players were good signings, but you're just kind of at the end of the rope on them. Aroldis Chapman was a great contract. And like a lot of older players, you sign a great contract, you got to eat the last few years. And I think that's what the Yankees are doing right now. And you can kind of go down the list. My problem is the budget. The budget deals just stopped working out for the Yankees. The Yankees like twirled some magic in Boone's first 2 years, where they were able to pick up a whole bunch of players off the
Even
scrappy.
during Girardi years,
Yeah,
look at DD and guys.
Yeah,
like
the
that.
Yankees are good at that, right? That's something the Yankees are able to do. They have been able to take a player off the scrap heap and turn them into something good. And that magic kept the Yankees going for a long time. And it allowed the Yankees to not spend money and still win 60% of their games. And it stopped working this season. No one, in fact, the opposite happened. Basically, everything went wrong this season, right? Their luck just kind of came home to roost. And I think the discussion between Cashman and the Steinbrenners this offseason is, Steinbrenners, how badly do you want to win? Right? Do you want to be the best team in the American League? If you want to be the best team in the American League, I need you to go out and spend $70 million. We don't know what the luxury tax is going to be. It's probably going to go up. And so that, there will be some extra spending, but there's also a lot of players in this team that are getting expensive. Aaron Judge is going to arbitration for the third time next year. He's going to get paid $20 million. He's getting paid, I think, $8 million right now. There are other players on this roster like Gary Sanchez that are going to get a raise. And then there's a lot of players that you can't move. You can't move Giancarlo Stanton. No one's going to take him. And so, the Yankees are in a bit of a pickle right now. And again, the only way out, there's two ways out of the pickle. One is to rebuild, right? They could, at the end of the season, even if they manage to kind of limp into the playoffs, at the end of the season, the Yankees could say, something, this core is not going to win the World Series next year. Let's get something for them and have a couple of down years and then rebuild. But then you're going to waste Garrett Cole's best years. You're going to waste the remainder of Giancarlo Stanton's good years. And I'm not sure how much closer you get to win the World Series at that point. I think the other option is to take this current core, maybe trade away some of the dead weight players, and go out and get Max Scherzer. We're going to talk about him later in this episode. Right? Go out and get the best player again. They did that when they got Garrett Cole, and they need to do it again. Because if not, the team that gets the best player is going to be better than them. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, no. You did mention that the Yankees have the third most wins over the Aaron Boone era. Of course, last year their team was on pace to win just 89 games. This year, they're going to win just 90 games. Can you make the argument? And I'm still going to hold to the Yankees' argument is that you got to reach the World Series, and he's had 4 years to do that. He hasn't been able to do it. But can you make the argument that the first couple years of a manager's tenure, it's more a reflection of the guy before you, and the last couple of years after you've been there, it's more a reflection of you, and the Yankees haven't gotten better under Boone?
I think the GM can make that argument. I don't think the manager can, right? The manager's job is to take the players given to him and get the best that he can out of them.
Right, and he's not.
Well, yeah, probably not, right? But the argument for Aaron Boone is an argument that we as fans will never really understand, right? Because it's the argument that in the clubhouse he's really good. I think strategically he has been not great lately. I have not been crazy about his kind of bullpen choices and the kind of those things, but that's ultimately a fairly small part of managing. I think the biggest question the Yankees need to ask is, did they make a good decision when they hired Eric Kressley to be the head of their training department, who was another one of those wonder kids who I was very excited about when they signed, but nothing has changed in that sense, right? 3 seasons in a row now, more Yankees have been injured than healthy, and that's not good.
Interesting. It's a great point. Now you're talking about dead weight, and this is the pitch out that we were going to go for here. The Yankees announced today that Gleyber Torres is not going to be a shortstop anymore, at least in 2021, and he's now going to be a second baseman. And the Yankees invested $90 million over the winter in DJ LeMahieu, an aging second baseman. So is that a GM failure? I'd like you to talk about that for a minute. And then I have just a couple of quick questions to ask you about Gleyber before you talk about what's his name? Max Scherzer.
I mean, look, if you could go back in time and undo the DJ LeMahieu signing, I think every Yankee fan and every Yankee executive would do it right now.
I'd like to say there was one guy who kept saying, "Don't do it."
There was you, yes. Look, you were right about DJ LeMahieu. Now let me say this: he's only getting paid $15 million. it's into his 30s, and he's clearly not going to be a super productive player late into his 30s. I think there's some hope that they juice the ball again and he can hit home runs again. I think he's been particularly hurt by that, and I think that's another. There's essentially been two changes to the game of baseball that's beyond the Yankees that has really hurt them. I think they probably optimized for the juice ball and for spider tack, and when those two things went away, when baseball kind of went back to what it was back when the Yankees weren't very good, 2014 through 2016, they suffered, and they have not been good since then. I think Gleyber Torres, I don't think that's a GM failure, right? Just based on what they got, what they cost them to get Gleyber Torres, and what they've gotten out of him through the base for their career, they could walk away from him right now and be winners. DJ LeMahieu, look, I think the real question is, okay, it's a sunk cost. How do you handle it? Do you make him is he your starting first baseman next year? If he's your starting first baseman next year, he's got to hit. He's got to hit some home runs. Right now, he's got basically no power over the last month and a half. He's got 9 home runs on the season. He has an average player, slightly above average player by the hitting line. And as a second baseman who's a solid defensive player, that's fine. But as a first baseman, that's a liability. And so I think this is a temporary solution. Gleyber Torres has been so bad at shortstop that you cannot start him out there for another game, right? The Yankees are losing games. And frankly, like hanging the young pitchers out to dry because Gleyber shortstop can't field an easy ground ball. So for now, you put him at second. Maybe he looks good at second. Maybe that settles his mind down. He starts hitting. And then you think about what to do in the offseason. And
so let me ask you those questions.
I think Gleyber Torres is traded 100%.
There it is. You read my mind.
I mean, it's clearly what they're heading to. There's like 15 great shortstop free agents this offseason. There's left-handed batters for sale. Shortstops are going to be cheap this offseason because there's so many of them. And the Yankees are going to have their pick. And I think that a Corey Seager or Carlos Correa or Marcus Semien or Trevor Story or someone like that is the Yankee shortstop next year, not Gleyber Torres. Now, let me say one thing. There was a line of criticism against Brian Cashman about he decided not to keep Didi Gregorius, and that was a mistake. Didi Gregorius is worse than Gleyber Torres this season. He is not starting for the Phillies. He has been one of the worst batters in the major leagues. So I don't think if that is the decision, that's the problem. I think you had a point about DJ LeMahieu, and you were right about that, but it's a sunk cost. So the question is, what do you do about it? No one's going to take him off your hands at this point. And so I think you need to keep him as a second baseman for a couple more years, and maybe a third baseman. That's the other option. Gio Urshela does not look good either, especially on defense. I think he's got to be injured. I don't know. I watched Gio Urshela, and I think he's injured. And so, how do you manage this roster for the next 3 weeks or into the playoffs is a different question than like what's the long-term future of any of these players. I think you're going to see a lot of Gleyber Torres on the bench this month. You're going to see a little bit of him starting at second. You're going to see a little bit of DJ LeMahieu at second and third, maybe a little bit at first, so they have a logjam at first. I think the priority should be right now getting Luke Voigt's bat into the lineup. He is still a good bat and was a good bat up until the moment the Yankees just banished him to a part-time role. And, it is weird to see a player return to the lineup, win Player of the Week, and then get benched. That is odd. And I get why they're doing it. They're doing it because they don't want to play Giancarlo Stanton in the field every day and tire him out and potentially get him injured. They're doing it because Anthony Rizzo is a really good defensive first baseman. But I think you have to make room for the second best hitter on this team, and that's Luke Voigt. I think Luke Voigt's a better hitter than Giancarlo Stanton. If Stanton can't play the outfield every day, he should be benched. He should sit on the bench and pinch hit. Excuse me. And not let Luke Voigt play every day.
So to recap, and then I'm going to give you some props. I agree with you. I think Gleyber Torres is going to be traded. If I have DJ LeMahieu and he is a sunk cost and he is his values as a second baseman, I think you have to play him at second next year. And I think you make a great point about the spider tack and the unjuiced ball is that things that have happened in baseball happened at the expense of the Yankees. They designed a team and baseball made changes to the sport, to the actual sport after the Yankees had designed the team in a certain ways. And I do not believe, as I said, that Gleyber will be playing shortstop. But you were the guy, even when he was hitting really well, all those years ago on the Bronx Beat podcast that was never sold on Didi Gregorius, who looked at his batted ball percentage and his the exit velocity and things like this, and where he was getting his hits and how he was getting his hits. And you were saying, a lot of this is a mirage, and you might have been years ahead of yourself on, and you were, it looks like, he wasn't able to sustain it, especially after he left the confines of Yankee Stadium.
His Statcast had just come out. His Statcast numbers were bad. And the only explanation for why they were bad, other than he was getting lucky, was Yankee Stadium. Second he leaves Yankee Stadium, he wasn't good anymore. And I think that's kind of what we should expect. But I think it should tell you something that left-handed pull hitters are something the Yankees should invest in.
Yes, well, we've talked about that a million times. But let's now let you talk about Max Scherzer.
Max Scherzer struck out 3,000 batters. It's one of those big milestones, one of those really exciting milestones to watch him do it. Max Scherzer is, I think, low key the best pitcher of his generation. And I don't think we treat him that way really all that often. He's a guy he was a late bloomer. His first really good season was when he was 28 for the Tigers. And just ever since that season, he has been just by far the best pitcher, best starting pitcher in baseball. I think pretty much every single season he's been that consistent, and he's basically been that good this season as well. It is great to see a 36-year-old just continue to be at the top of his game. When I think about a Roger Clemens, or I think about a Randy Johnson, or Curt Schilling, or some of the other more recent players who had these really great Hall of Fame careers and really put up impressive numbers over the long term, they're players who did this into their late 30s, who when they were 36 years old, they were still capable of being the best pitcher on a World Series winning team. And the Yankees relied on a lot of those guys really deep into their careers. And I think Max Scherzer looks like a kind of guy who's going to be Roger Clemens. I mean, there's other reasons for Roger Clemens being that good late into his career, but it's going to be somebody like that who isn't done yet. I mean, he's a guy who he just hit his 3,000th strikeout. That puts him pretty high on the leaderboards. So right now he is 19th overall in strikeouts. He is just behind Justin Verlander for the active lead. And he's going to pass CC Sabathia probably early next year. And I think we could see Max Scherzer end his career as maybe the number 3 or 4, and then probably the number 4 strikeout pitcher of all time, right behind Roger Clemens. And Paul, my pitch right now, I'm going to continue this pitch for a long time, is I want him to do that to end his career with the New York Yankees.
All right, so let's pretend he's a free agent at the end of the year.
He's
is
a
that
free
true?
agent after this offseason.
All right. He's a free agent during this offseason.
He becomes a free agent after the World Series. Yes. So this offseason,
right.
He's a World Series.
All right. So
he's a free agent.
Give me, how old is he? 36?
He's 36 years old. That's the question. You're the guy who doesn't like the old guys, right? So
so I'm going to ask you first. Like, give me your best offer for Justin Verlander. Something that's going to get it done.
5 years, $125 million.
You're going to give him 5 years.
I give him a 5-year contract at $25 million. Maybe $30 million, frankly. So, 150, 5 years, $150 million. I give Max Scherzer. Would you do that deal?
I would not. I the other day on the Mac and Jack show I was talking about, I wouldn't go anywhere near a long-term deal with a different situation. Jacob deGrom, who's like a 34, I believe now. Wow.
But the difference is deGrom is injured every year.
That's correct.
Right? Scherzer's still on the top of his game, and you're going to eat the last 2 years of that contract probably. Some team's going to give it to him.
So and you're going to go 5 years, $30 million a year.
You want to win the World Series? This is how you win the World Series. This is how the Yankees won the World Series.
That's correct.
Right?
I have always argued
Roger Clemens was at 38 in 2000. I mean, David Wells
win the World
was
Series
old.
when they spend the money.
Well, and the thing is you want to spend the money on really good players. And
he's a winner too. That's something
there's no pitcher available to the Yankees better than Max Scherzer. And again, you've got to compete with the Dodgers and the Astros and all these other teams that also are kind of in a window to win the World Series for that player. And I'll tell you, if they only sign Max Scherzer, it's not a good deal, right? Like this, if they want to go give $30 million to Max Scherzer, they got to give $30 million to a bunch of bullpen arms. They got to give another $30 million to another hitter or two, a big left-handed hitter of some kind. They got to re-sign Aaron Judge. right? Like this is they cannot just go get one guy. They got one guy. His name is Garrett Cole. And Garrett Cole has been everything we could have asked him to be, right? Garrett Cole is the favorite for the American League Cy Young Award this year. And other than maybe if you kind of squint your eyes at Nathan Eovaldi, it's not even close. So he is worth that contract, and the Yankees still aren't going to make the playoffs. And so, the Yankees got to build a team around him. But I would love to go into the playoffs with Max Scherzer and Garrett Cole in my rotation. Right, that would be a good playoff. That would be a playoff. That would be a playoff rotation that people would be afraid of. That could stand up against the best teams in the league, and I think that's what it takes. So yeah, 3,000 strikeouts. I want number 4,000 in a New York Yankees uniform.
Oh boy, you are going for it big time. Is Corey Kluber part of that rotation?
No.
Jordan Montgomery?
Yes.
Debbie Garcia?
No.
Domingo Germán?
No.
Interesting.
So I think the Yankees have, I think, the makings of a solid rotation. They already have a good. If you look at their numbers on the season, they actually have a pretty good rotation. It hasn't felt like it because major league starters in general aren't great right now. Like the major league starters have been on a downward trend for the last 3 or 4 years, and so you have a lot of rotations that look like the Yankees, where they have 1 or 2 really good starters and then kind of a bunch of guys trying to figure it out behind them. And so if you have to kind of piece together a rotation with with the last 2 guys are kind of rotating between the minors and they aren't very good. If you got a good bullpen, you can do it. But the Yankees don't have a good bullpen, and so they can't. And I think that's honestly the problem this season. It's not the rotation, but Jordan Montgomery in Game 2. I don't know. I don't feel good about that. I really don't. I don't really feel good about Nestor Cortez in Game 3. But I don't feel bad about those guys in Games 3 and 4. If you can win 1 or 2 games with Scherzer and Cole. That's the kind of move I hope the Yankees make. It's a 90s Yankees move, 100% a 90s Yankees move. He's the equivalent of going out and getting Cone or Wells or Clemens, or all 3 of them.
Right. So I guess the difference is, I guess I've been stung enough times. I love it when the Yankees go out and get the big player, but as you were referring to, what the Yankees seem to do is they go out and they get the big player, and then they go, look what we did. And now we can scrimp and save on the other ends, and they don't build the entire. They go halfway. They don't go the full way.
They have the same budget as they did 15 years ago.
Correct.
Right. That's a problem. That's why they aren't that good. That's why they're about they're about as good as a lot of the other teams that spend $190 million a year. And again, if that's what the Steinbrenners are okay with, I mean, that's what we're getting. And then you got to kind of readjust. Then you don't go out and get Scherzer. Then you be a little more economical with your roster, and you have that really good farm system with a lot of really good players coming up, and you kind of wait for that next generation. But if you want to take this core, if you want to take Aaron Judge and Gary Sanchez and Giancarlo Stanton and Luke Voit and Joey Gallo and all those guys to a World Series, you do it by going out and getting another 3 or 4 players who are at the top of their game. You get the best 2 relievers in the market. You get the best starting pitcher in the market. You get a solid left-handed batter to complement them.
Amen. I hope they do. Now, speaking of great Yankee teams, a great Yankee, Derek Jeter, just got in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And then as I look back, I love Derek Jeter. I think everybody loved Derek Jeter. But at the end, there was all the talk about, past the diving Jeter, and he's really not a good defensive shortstop. And I think sometimes we take a look at a guy and we sort of forget how great they truly are. And maybe at the end, we didn't appreciate Jeter for everything that he was, as we tried to be, just I think as human beings, sometimes overly critical or whatever. But what a great Yankee. What a great Hall of Famer. I loved his humility in the speech, and I love how he always defers to Mr. Torre as Mr. T. And the fact that he was one of those guys that you knew every single day was going to come out there and play hard and give your team the best chance to win. It's not a coincidence the Yankees were so great when he was their shortstop and playing so well. So I believe you have a great final memory of Derek Jeter, and why don't you share that with us? Like you, it was tough watching Derek Jeter's last couple of years. He really did limp to the finish. He was really a liability on the team the last couple of seasons, but he wanted to keep playing. And other than the one season that he was hurt, he was in the lineup basically every day, batting second and playing a not great shortstop at the end. I mean, not a great shortstop at the beginning either, but really not great shortstop at the end, and he wasn't hitting to kind of offset it. And that was a rough season. The 2014 season, that was not a fun season to watch the Yankees.
And it was a season I honestly, by the end, wasn't watching the Yankees all that much. I just started grad school. I was up to my nose in reading. And I had just moved into my new apartment. And I had the game on in the background, right? The game's on in the background. And all of a sudden, I see that the Yankees are up and David Robertson blows a save. And Michael Kay, in his infinite wisdom, goes, that means Jeter's coming up in the bottom of the inning. And to me, that was just it was a moment where immediately we all knew what was going to happen, right? The moment that we knew that Derek Jeter was going to have a shot to win the game. I mean, I think we all just kind of perked up and watched, and he did it. And we have a clip of this game, and I mean, just remember your reaction when you saw this. I cheered like we won the World Series. Let's watch this.
You know what I love, EJ?
I was 9 years old when Derek Jeter debuted, right? So when I was a kid, my parents bought me a signed baseball by Derek Jeter, a signed Derek Jeter baseball. And like my entire baseball watching career, it was Derek Jeter making dramatic moment after dramatic moment, right? It was all those great playoff moments. It was him being the leader of the team when the Yankees moved from the old stadium to the new stadium, giving a speech. I have a wonderful photo I took when I was at the last game at Yankee Stadium, looking down on Derek Jeter, waving thank you to everybody. And you couldn't write it better, right? You could not send him off any better than he got sent off in his last game at Yankee Stadium. Just absolutely amazing. It's a memory I'll remember forever. All those last couple of bad years with Jeter are completely forgotten. He's the best.
Yeah, right. And again, I think sometimes in the moment we want the teams to win, and when a legend slowly winds to the finish, sometimes it's hard. And I hope that we appreciate the great players when we're watching them as great players. And Jeter was definitely that great player. What I loved about that video too was that was an angle I'd never seen before.
Yeah, me neither. Nice job, Mac.
Yeah, right. He can find the good stuff out there. So coming up, we just had Jeter going into the Hall of Fame. Coming up on the next Hall of Fame ballot, there are two Yankees. I don't think either of them are going to get in this year. That's Mark Teixeira, who just not a Hall of Famer. These are the following guys. These are the guys ahead of Teixeira in all-time WAR who are not yet in the Hall of Fame. Albert Pujols, he'll go in. Miguel Cabrera, he'll go in. Then you have Joey Votto, Todd Helton, Keith Hernandez, John Olerud, Will Clark, Fred McGriff, and Norm Cash. If they all get in, maybe I can make a case for Teixeira. The other guy's A-Rod, who is really one of the greatest of all time, if you look at the statistics, but I don't think baseball's ready to elect A-Rod into the Hall of Fame anytime soon because of the performance-enhancing drugs. In spite of his great numbers, I think he's going to be like Clemens at this point and Barry Bonds at this point and be on the outside looking in. So absent of the specialty votes and all that, because I don't even think they figured out who's going to be in what specialty vote, which year and that kind of stuff. As I was looking I don't think there's going to be a Yankee elected by the Baseball Writers Association of America, as long as the steroid guys or the perceived steroid guys don't get in, until the year 2025. And in 2025, there are no fewer than 9 guys who are going to be on the ballot who had played for the Yankees. Believe it or not. That list includes.
Wait. Let me see if I can name him.
Oh my God. You'll never get him, but go for it.
CC Sabathia.
Well, there's one.
Right. He's going to get in.
He's getting in. There's another guy who's getting in who was a Yankee, who's going to have more
guy
votes
who's getting
than CC.
Who's got more votes than CC?
He's going to, in fact, a guy who we should have a discussion about, who really should go in unanimously. He should be an absolute. If anybody doesn't vote for him, they're absolutely wrong. He wasn't a Yankee for long.
What year did CC retire?
Whatever, I guess 2019.
Ichiro.
Yes, correct.
Yes. Oh, Ichiro. I want to live in the universe where Ichiro was a Major League Baseball player at 19 years old. We missed his best years.
Yes, we did.
And there's kind of 2 different types of players that make the Hall of Fame. There's the players who were just that good, right? And they were that good, and they weren't remarkable in that like you could remember every little thing they ever did, but they were just that good, and so they made it into the Hall of Fame. And then there are players who are unique. So players who are unique, I'm thinking about someone like a Vlad Guerrero. Guerrero was, not that different from like a Bobby Abreu or a Mark Teixeira or someone like that in terms of his overall numbers. His numbers, they're really good, but they're not unique in any real way. But he was a memorable player. He was a player who was just so special when he was out there that he was an easy Hall of Famer. You also have players like Bruce Sutter who are historically important. Ichiro is historically important. He was that good. And he was a unique player, the type of player that you can tell your kids about, in decades, the type of player that you just rarely ever see. Just incredible. And I'm glad he had that one good year with the Yankees. I wish he didn't stick around as long as he did. But that one year after they traded for him, it was fun to watch, kind of vintage-ish Ichiro Suzuki. And I just wish they had used him as a relief pitcher.
Well, he better go in unanimously, as I say. So as we wrap up for today, can you name the other 7 guys who put on pinstripes who are going to be on that 2025 ballot?
Oh, dude, that's really hard.
It's impossible.
Okay. So Teixeira, we've already named.
Right. But I'm not. These are guys who are going to have. This is going to be their first year on the ballot.
What year did Beltran retire? Was it Beltran?
It's not. He's not there.
Soriano.
No, he's already been on there, I think.
Man,
Want me to give you some hints?
Yeah, give me some hints. This is a hard one.
All right. This guy was a Yankee shortstop for about 2 seconds.
Troy Tulowitzki.
That's one of them.
Okay.
This guy was a Yankee catcher for a couple of years, and there's a guy on the Mets who has a similar or the same last name.
Oh, he'll be. Russell Martin will be an interesting pick.
No, not Martin. Not Russell. Martin.
Not Martin. Oh, I was going to go for Russell Martin. Okay. Who else was a Yankee catcher for a couple of years?
He almost had a fight once after a guy hit a home run. He stood there at home plate and.
Oh God! Oh, was it Molina?
Nope. I'm thinking of my son Ryan had the best home run call that John Sterling never had. It should have gone like this: swung on and driven to deep right. It is high. It is far. It is gone. Brian McCann. Brian McDid.
McCann. Oh yeah, you're right. I forgot McCann retired. Okay, yeah, okay. I can see McCann's an interesting player. You're right. He was a grump.
All right, a center fielder, a left-handed hitting center fielder, had a couple 40 home run seasons with the Yankees.
Curtis Granderson. Okay.
And guy who hit for the cycle for the Yankees, came up as a Yankee, had a little steroid problem himself. I think he played for the White Sox. He played a lot of teams.
Who hit for the cycle?
Yeah,
Oh God, I know this. I know who you're talking about. Oh God.
Sterling's call for him was something, a play on words about somebody who would deliver a drink to your house in the olden days off a
The
cart.
Milkman delivers.
The milkman.
Melky Cabrera,
Yeah, Melky Cabrera. And
Melky
then
Cabrera had a better career than I ever would have believed.
nobody would have thought it.
Yeah.
You ready? The other 3, I'm not even gonna have you guess. Kendrys Morales,
All right. Oh yeah, that was an adventure.
Martin Prado,
All right.
and Mark Reynolds, who was also a Yankee for about 2 seconds.
Yeah, all three budget attempts at a budget player that the Yankees try to do. They do this every year. They try to pick up one or two budget players, and it never seems to work out.
It doesn't seem to work out. Well, in 2025, we'll be able to talk about CeCe and Ichiro both going in. Any parting thoughts for us this week as we look ahead?
You got an easy schedule. You got games against the Baltimore Orioles, Cleveland Indians, Texas Rangers. These are bad teams. The Yankees should win these games.
They better win these games, right?
Yep.
All right. This has been the Start Spreading the News podcast.